Well, we've had a little break and now we're back. My name is, of course, Alexander Velky, and I'm here today with Alexander Velky to discuss Mistaken for Art or Rubbish. I'm going right off my glasses. So we've been through the first 11 poems. Did you not think that was enough? No, I think we should keep going. Okay, let's move on to the next poem then. Yeah, I think it's going well. Damien Hirst responds to his critics. Damien Hirst responds to his critics. This is basically me imagining that I'm Damien Hirst, and that first line, "You've backed me into a corner," that is a reference to the work that this is mostly about of Damien Hirst's is For the Love of God, and he was the skull with diamonds all over it. He called that piece For the Love of God, he said, because he remembered his mother saying to him, "For the love of God, what are you going to do next?" And so that first line, "You've backed me into a corner," that is kind of supposed to be spoken to her, saying, you know, well, you've challenged me, what else can I do from there? And it's as though like he's trying to make the most outrageous thing, and obviously there's a lot of stuff in there about how that particular piece of art seemed to all be about the price and about whether he could find a buyer and about how much it cost to make, because it was all made of diamonds. And I kind of like the idea that underneath all that he just wanted to make something really, really that he thought was beautiful. Dedication to Damien Hirst, but then it's not the famous Damien Hirst. Do you enjoy being contrary? I don't know if that's true. Who is the Slovenian Damien Hirst? The Slovenian Damien Hirst is a guy I came across on the internet. He's basically a Slovenian artist who has called himself Damien Hirst, therefore appropriating the name of the more famous YBA of the same name. And the Slovenian Damien Hirst is a very subversive artist, and his stuff is very, very interesting in a different way from the more
The format of this is almost like a song. It's sort of verse, verse, chorus, verse, verse, chorus, chorus.
It is almost like a song. A lot of my poems sort of annoyingly have melodies in my head, but they're not particularly good melodies. They'll usually either be ones that I've accidentally stolen from someone else, or ones that I can't hum myself, let alone sing, or they'll just be ones that aren't very attractive to the ear. I don't play an instrument. I've never been a songwriter, so usually they either come out as poems or I discard them.
I think you have a quote from him at the beginning of the book, so
No.
perhaps you should explain.
No.
Yes, it's here. Art is what is bought as art. What defines art is therefore the act of buying something as art. Well, if he said that, why did you need to write the poem? I think he'd already said that.
I don't know really.
Who's the African dictator?
The African dictator is not a real African dictator, although it could well have been. Basically, it's an imagined audience for Hirst's piece. I mean, who could afford something that was covered in so many diamonds and was a skull, and also who would want to buy it? And the people that I can imagine might want to were an obscenely wealthy Russian oligarch, oil tycoon, an African dictator, probably an absolute monarch like the King of Swaziland, or 50 Cent.
Who's 50 Cent?
Who is 50 Cent? I don't really know. I believe he's an American, and he sells clothes and computer games and guns and things, and yeah, I think he's really rich, and I think he likes diamonds. So.
Okay, let's move on. Lost Object.
Lost Object is began with the idea of found art. I was doing a filling exercise towards the end of the book where I felt I'd sort of missed a few really important areas of the arts debate and about the kind of interesting subjects for discussion that could be found within contemporary art. And one of those was found art, and so I decided to write a poem about found art, and I wrote this, and then it wasn't about found art in the end at all.
The first line is, "I found an object in a location." Could you have been more specific? What was the object you found?
I can't really say what the object is.
Where was the location?
Or the location. I can't really say what the location is either.
Why do you call it forget-me-not?
It's called forget-me-not because obviously that's the name of the flower, but also because I like the idea that in a lot of modern artworks, and Damien Hirst is a classic example, but he's certainly not the only one, he's the most famous one, the title of the piece has quite an obscure relationship with the piece itself. And in this case, actually, it's the sort of name that you could imagine being the name of a modern art piece, like a bit of blue tack stuck to a wall or a light going off and on in a room. But in this case, because it's about an object that has been said to have been taken and that people seem to be missing, it is actually quite a literal name for it. It's the sort of name that it should have. And I thought I could subvert it by not subverting it at all. Which is kind of what I do with poetry, really, I think.
Cock. There's a use of repetition at the end of the lines here. It's kind of irritating.
Yeah, it does repeat. I'm not really sure why I did that. I suppose this is another one of those ones that kind of has a kind of a melody to it in my head, and when I read it out it doesn't sound like it sounds in my head, but maybe that's a good thing. To completely ruin it for you, I mean, it could be about anything, but for me the object is a human being. Probably a particularly vulnerable one, like a baby or something. And it's this idea, I mean, how far is a kind of live kidnapping away from, you know, a shark in formaldehyde? And could it be argued to be art? My argument would be that it could be argued to be art. I don't think it'd be very good art. I don't think anyone should do it. And I think by society's standards you would be rightly judged to be insane. Criminally insane if you did it. But I think anything can be art. I think pretty much anything can be art. It is about intent, really. And I wasn't thinking it when I wrote it, but I think this poem was heavily influenced by National Anthem, the first in the series of Black Mirror TV programmes by Charlie Brooker, where somebody kidnaps a princess and it turns out that the person who's done the kidnapping and blackmailed a prime minister into having sex with a pig was actually a former Turner Prize winner. And I don't know, there was something very inspiring about that, and it seemed weirdly, horribly believable. Well, moving swiftly on. Doubts. I have my doubts, I probably have some of yours, so give me just a moment while I impregnate this pause. JWoww didn't like that opening. He said, how could you take someone seriously after they said something like that? I don't think he's fully understood it though. JWoww from the New Welsh Review, he really hated this poem. Yeah, he did. He really hated this one, yeah. He says it's best read as a collection of all the signs and symptoms of all your underlying neuroses. Yeah, maybe he's got a point. Could you have made a shorter list of all your underlying neuroses? It's not really about my underlying neuroses though, because they're quite on the surface in all of my work, I think, and in my person, in my face. You can see them. Look, see them there. Do you think this is about your neuroses? Doubts is really a statement of intent, but because the intent is to doubt everything, including one's own intent, it is a bit of a wet bowl of chips. It's sort of like dropping a lit match into a box of fireworks if those fireworks had already been dropped into a pool of water. Do you think your poem is worthy of an audible groan? I don't even think it's worth that. I think if I read this live at an open mic thing, I don't think it would get a groan. I don't think it would get applause. I actually think the time would pass, approximately 4 minutes, and nobody would actually know where that part of their life had gone. Well, he's got a point. So yeah, it is literally it's like a sack of damp squibs, or you know, a colossal damp squib, if you will. A damp colossal squib, yeah.
Do you think literal self-reflexivity is clever?
I looked up self-reflexivity because, as with a few of the phrases in the review, in the New Welsh Review, I didn't really know what it meant. It was what I view as academic language, which I don't really use. I don't think self-reflexivity is a thing. I think that's tautological. I think reflexivity is already concerned with the self, and it's kind of self-referentiality, and reflexivity is kind of conflated the two into that phrase. So it probably ends up having the opposite meaning, if anything.
Jeremy Paxman recently wrote that poets should face a poet's inquisition for their poetry.
Yeah, I think he said a poetry interrogation or a poetry inquisition. Yeah, a poetry inquisition.
Or something like that, yeah. Do you think that's what JWoww is doing to you here?
I actually, no, he's doing it to himself, but I'll tell you why. In the press release that I sent with this book, I made very strong, unequivocal accusations about the poetry scene. I basically said that the poetry scene was divided between people, kind of stand-up performance poets, who were only doing that for attention and had no real raison d'etre, had no kind of skill or no kind of artistic questions, and that they just couldn't be bothered to learn to play guitar, and that's why they were doing it. And on the other side you had academic poets at poorly attended arts centre readings, and Mr. Moraes is certainly in the second camp. I think possibly he's won some prizes or awards. He's certainly not unpopular. I think he's strong within his field. I've read some of his work, which I believe was a parody poem or a sort of comic poem based on a classic Greek myth. It was certainly technically good. It was, I could see, I guess, that it was kind of funny. I'd love to be able to hate it in the same way that he hates this, but it didn't inspire hatred in me at all. It was quite good. But again, it's not the sort of thing I see the point in me trying to do.
You say
what I would do.
In this poem, I'm a clinical believer in the right to be wrong. Do you think you're exercising that right in this poem?
I am, yeah. I'm exercising that in this whole collection, and I don't think that being wrong is a bad thing, and I don't think self-publishing is a bad thing, even though I recognise that had this book been through an editor at Faber, if for some weird reason I'd even got someone there to look at it, there's no way this would have been published like this. At the very most, 2 or 3 of these poems would have been considered fit for publication by any well-known poetry publisher, and I firmly believe that those that would not have been considered worthy of publication are the most important poems in this book, because where else are you going to see those poems? Well, yeah, you might not want to see them. I guess that could be a thing too, but well, you're going to see them now because I'm publishing them.
The next poem is Celebration Mix.
Kanaan is a Canadian rapper of Somali descent, and he wrote a really quite lovely song called Waving Flag, which was about the civil war in Somalia, about growing up in a war-torn, poor country, and about kind of finding pride, happiness, joyfulness, and patriotism, I suppose, despite all that. And it was a brilliant song, and Coca-Cola heard it and they liked the chorus, and they said, oh, we'd like to use this as our World Cup song, but we don't like all the lyrics. That's the trouble. Could you change all the lyrics so it's about football? And Kanaan, probably with 2 things in mind: one, that he'd quite like some money from Coca-Cola, and another, probably the more justifiable one, the one that artistically speaking I think is excusable, is to say that, oh, you know, more people will hear my work, maybe they'll hear the original song, maybe they'll like that, I can spread my message further, I can spread my artistic vision further. And he did that, and the version about football was called Celebration Mix, and that's why this poem is called Celebration Mix.
The dedication says, for Kanaan, K''Naan, with sympathy.
The weird and probably ridiculous and horrible irony is I never would have heard the song Waving Flag, the original, which I do really like, had I not first heard Celebration Mix, the football version, which I thought was catchy.
Why are you offering him your sympathy?
I'm offering him sympathy because I think any artist could end up doing the same in his shoes. I'm not saying I wouldn't.
Why is the name of this poem in quotation marks? Celebration mix.
I think really there's a celebration mix possible for any kind of artwork out there. There's a kind of version of it that could be hijacked for corporate needs, and that version bears really no resemblance. I mean, once you've made the celebration mix of a thing, the thing ceases to be what it originally was. That's kind of what I'm saying here. It might not be true, but that's what I'm saying.
Do you really think Chumbawamba's World Cup song was shit?
Chumbawamba's World Cup song wasn't great. I genuinely really love Chumbawamba, particularly their last two albums, but also the album Anarchy. They're a great band. If you only know them for that tub thumping song, you should really listen to The Boy Bands Have Won, or Anarchy, or ABCDEFG, their concept album about music, which in itself was a massive, massive influence on my poetry and the way I decided to kind of collate and release my poetry.
Do you drink Coke?
I sometimes drink Coke.
Sonnets for Plop.
Sonnets for Plop. Okay, so these are two sonnets, and it's really about...
Who is Plop?
Now, Plop isn't a person. It could quite as easily be called Sonnets for Plonk, or one could be Sonnet for Plop and the other could be Sonnet for Plonk. It's about Plop art or Plonk art, and it's about public art, art that confronts people in public spaces. And it's about why people always seem to dislike it, or why so many people naturally dislike it. People are perfectly happy on the whole to have adverts in public spaces, or you know, kind of state propaganda in public places, but put art in public places and suddenly people think, you know, they've got the right to have an opinion about it then. And usually I would say that is a very negative opinion, purely based on the fact that it is art in a public place confronting them as art.
Why couldn't you have fit the idea into one sonnet?
I couldn't fit the idea into one sonnet because I'm not a good enough poet.
Do you really think this is anyone's favourite poem in the book?
I don't think this is anyone's favourite poem in the book, no, but I still think it needs to be in the book. I'll be honest, this was a kind of filler poem, not that like, oh god, I need more poems for the book, because I had poems, but I felt this needed to be dealt with and I wanted to write about it, so I wrote about it. That's not normally how I approach things. Normally I just, whatever happens comes out and then I stick a label on it. Look, that does sound a bit like an art factory, but one that's been kind of taken over by robots, I like to think. Robots that have wiped their programming and are kind of going haywire. Okay, Art School. Art School. Art School is a poem about just the idea of teaching art. And while earlier on I might have said that I thought an art teacher was a very good and worthwhile thing to be, and I do think that, I still think that the idea of an art school is problematic, or certainly could be problematic, and just even thinking about it is a very confusing concept. And I was confused about it, so I wrote a poem about it. And that's when I write poems, because all of these poems are things that have confused me. This book could as easily be called Alexander Velky Has Doubts Volume 1, Things That Have Confused Me. Or Has Doubts in itself could.
Did you go to art school?
I didn't go to art school. I kind of wish I had.
So you didn't go to art school?
No.
So you have no experience of art school?
I don't know.
Whatsoever.
No, I don't have any experience of it.
Should you then be writing poems about art school?
Well, I don't write what I know. I write what I don't know.
What's the point of writing poems about something you don't know about?
That is, again, the whole point.
Write what you know.
If I'm just writing stuff that I already know, like telling people, then I'll be writing fact sheets and instruction manuals.
Write what you know.
I'm writing poems about what I don't know, what interests me in the world, what surprises me, the questions that I have, the mysteries that are unsolved.
Write what you know!
Write what you know. What bollocks, isn't it? Wikipedia. Research it.
Money to Burn.
This is a poem about when the K Foundation burnt £1 million, and the art event or happening, I don't know the exact term, the K Foundation burned £1 million, where they went to an abandoned boathouse on the Scottish island of Jura and burnt £1 million.
You used a quote from Bill Drummond to co-introduce the book. Did you seek permission for that?
I actually did seek permission for the quote, but his press person, Maya, she never got back to me. And it did remind me that Bill Drummond is not the kind of guy that sought permission before he used other people's stuff, so probably a bit of a silly thing to do.
You burnt a £10 note when you recorded the recital of this poem, Money to Burn. Yes, very literal. Do you think that in doing that you felt 100,000th of what Bill Drummond and Jimmy Cauty felt when they burnt £1 million?
I think I felt exactly that. I held the blowtorch to it, saw the Queen's face, nothing personal, obviously. It's on all my money, so burnt it, and it took very quickly, and I was surprised by how quickly it took, and I dropped it. Despite myself, it took me aback. I knew I was only going to do that in one take. That's like the one thing that I'm not going to burn 20 quid. I'm not mad.
Do what thou wilt. Is that a quote from Aleister Crowley?
I'm not mad. No, I'm not mad. Perfectly sound mind.
Do what thou wilt. Is that a quote from Augustine of Hippo?
Do what thou wilt is a quotation from Augustine of Hippo that was appropriated by Aleister Crowley for his Thelema Creed, and I think it's a good one. But I prefer the original quote from Augustine of Hippo, St. Augustine, which was, love and do what thou wilt.
At the end of the poem you're listening to It's Grim Up North by the Jams. Why?
I'm listening to that on my headphones because it's a bloody brilliant song. It's yeah, it's just a good song. But also, I mean, that line, the Jams on my headphones, It's Grim Up North, that's a deliberate paraphrase from a line in Build a Fire by the KLF, which is a weirdly prescient song, or perhaps deliberately prescient song, on their best album, The White Room. And it says, the chorus is, build a fire, they're going to build a fire. And there's a kind of spoken word bit, which I think Drummond does, but I don't really know. And the end of one of the verses, he says, Lee Marvin on the jukebox, wandering star. That's it. Stop for lunch in some taco bar, Lee Marvin on the jukebox, wandering star. And I wanted to kind of use that rhythm and that phrasing for the end of this poem. And I think, to be honest, that's the only really good line in this poem. How to decide whether something is art. Another one that's really not going to be anyone's favourite poem. How to decide whether something is art is a kind of joke, and it's amazing how many people have read this. It's at least three. 3 people who've read it. It's amazing that 3 people have read it. No, I was going to say it's amazing how many people have read this and think it's didactic, and it's not. Obviously, it's quite heavy and obvious satire of the processes people usually use. I mean, for me, deciding whether something is art is as simple as if I think it is, but I'm far more likely to think it is if someone's told me it is, or if the context in which it's being presented to me is suggestive of an artistic
Simon
context.
Turner says this one can't seem to decide whether it's a reactionary ars poetica.
Ars poetica.
Ars poetica.
Ars poetica.
Ars poetica.
Ars poetica.
For real, which is to say painted art, like this, that has been produced at great emotional cost by a solitary genius.
Ars poetica.
Or a satirical critique of the way in which aesthetic and monetary value are conflated by the marketplace.
Yeah, no, it's not really about either of those things. It's just about how people decide whether things are art.
Is it an ars poetica?
Ars poetica.
Is this ars poetica?
Ars poetica.
Is this ars? Simon Turner also says, I think the poem could be greatly improved if the second stanza, where the critique of art dealing occurs, were to be moved to the end of the piece and deployed as a
Simon Turner should write
punchline.
his own poem. I mean, this is quite, I have thought about the order.
Just a thought.
I'm just, I wrote it as it came to me, but that's kind of how it's meant to be. It's about, poems are thought process.
Do you think it could be improved if all of the stanzas were sort of removed from the poem?
No, I don't think it would be better if it was all removed, because it's kind of an instructional poem, so you need some steps, don't you? You need some instructions. You got the thing like, was it made by an artist? So it can't be art if you just found it, or if an idiot made it. I mean, it can be, but the traditional view is that, or the conservative view is that it can't be. Then, money is going to make me money. He thinks that's the one that should be the end, but that's the next one here. And then the one after that is, was there some kind of suffering? Was it born of conflict? If it wasn't born of conflict, can't be art. You can't create art comfortably. Of course you can. Oh, rubbish. Much easier to create art if you're comfortable. A room of one's own and all that. How many
famous tramps do you know? Next one is physical form. People have a big problem, as my friend John Carbon knows, people have a big problem with digital art or like computerised art or anything that's even vaguely modern or contemporary, that vaguely presents art in a new context. Because, oh, it's not a nude picture of a woman that's allegorical for some Greek myth. Not sure if that's art. And then that is expanded in the... Why am I going through this word for word? Just read the
How do you
poem.
decide whether something is art?
Presumably it's just you've made it, so you stick it in the book and you think it's that'll do. That'll do, pig. That'll do. Cost. This poem is called Cost. Why bring up Ethelred the Unready? I like Ethelred the Unready because his name is suggestive of something that we understand, but it doesn't mean what most people think it does. Unready, if I'm recalling correctly, doesn't mean that, you know, he was always late for stuff. It generally means that he had ill counsel, ill advice, which comes in the next line.
Have you ever drunk Baikal?
I've never drunk Baikal.
What is Baikal?
I believe it's Portuguese white wine.
Is it because it's Portuguese?
The idea was that if somebody is interested in the brand, Moët, somebody loves, oh yeah, I love my champagne, but you give them like some obscure Portuguese white wine grade, they're not really interested in wine, they're interested in lifestyle, so they're not going to be bothered about that.
What's so funny about Michael Burke?
I don't think Michael Burke is particularly funny. Really, he's been used as kind of shorthand for news here, and because his name seemed to fit.
The last line, the power of conformity to affect change. Surely you meant effect. This is affect. There's an A. Affect.
I didn't mean effect. No, that was deliberate. Quite possibly when I first put that in, it might have been a mistake, but a very fast... I mean, I do know the difference between affect and effect. You expect me to believe that. I am a copywriter, as well as a poet. So it had a certain meaning, and I decided that that was the meaning that was meant for it. And so it is now. It doesn't mean bring about change, affect change. It means kind of change, or mitigate change, subvert change.
Did you actually proofread this?
And that is really what conformity does. And I'm doing that with my poetry in a way, in kind of using traditional, if you will, cliched elements. I know Simon Turner called my poems disappointingly traditional and pedestrian. And given the press release I wrote about how revolutionary and amazing they were, you might be expecting some kind of
what is this poem
modern
actually about?
form 3D concrete poetry, but they are quite traditional. And that really, for me, is the power of conformity to affect changes.
What is this poem actually about?
The poem is really about the idea of artistic worth and material worth being intertwined.
Doesn't seem to make any sense.
And if the poem seems confusing and contradictory and hypocritical, that's because those notions are all of those things. So it couldn't come out clean and pure.
It's shit
at the other end. Costly, you could say. Poverty. This one's called Poverty.
Simon Turner didn't like it.
No, Simon Turner didn't like this one. I dare say Mr. Moraes didn't like it either. I don't love it, but I think it has its place.
He said it was one of your more serious poems.
Poverty is really a poem not about poor people or about wealth. It is more a poverty of ideas, a poverty of ambition, a poverty of scope in art.
He used the phrase stanzaic straitjackets to indicate one of its numerous shortcomings. Do you want to talk to that?
Well, I'll talk about it. Well, actually, it's not. I mean, yeah, all the stanzas are 4 lines long. I don't see that as a particular downside to a poem. I think you can do quite a lot in that. I think history will tell us you can do quite a lot given that particular straitjacket. But there's actually a line in here where, quite deliberately in fact, where it says, "You're the comfort of this metre, the contraction that fits the bill." Because up until that point in the poem, everything is the same amount of syllables per line, and occasionally I'll be saying "you are" or "you are," purely based on how many beats it needed to have. And up at that point, I then let it go free, and then the only constraints after that are kind of basic rhyme to keep the rhythm going, and the slices of 4-line verses. And I think it's a shame that he missed that. Ironic?
Yeah, sort of like the Alanis Morissette song, Ironic.
Ironic?
It's ironic.
Is it serious?
No, yeah. No, there is a serious point at the end, but a lot of the things in it that seem serious, like about how poverty is a terrible thing, they're not meant to be trivial, but neither are they meant to be purely serious.
Is it serious?
Excuse me. Really, the serious bit comes at the end. Art is all that is free. It's about how there's so much hand-wringing going on in art circles about, oh no, our precious funding is being taken away, we won't be able to get together and read poetry in the arts centre because they're taking our money away. Well, you know, go down the park, go around each other's houses. You don't need other people's money to publish your poetry. You don't need tax money to publish poetry. It's ridiculous. You need tax money for basketball, you need basketballs. For poetry, all you need is a bit of charcoal or a pencil and some paper. You know, you don't. It's not an expensive hobby.
Why did you feel the need to publish this?
And art can be free, and obviously always was.
So you're
free
saying you
once.
approve of cuts to arts funding?
The only thing you need for art is time, and as a species, we all have leisure time. Certainly in the Western world where we live in relative luxury.
So you're saying you approve of David Cameron?
A large part of that luxury is leisure time.
So you're saying you approve of the current coalition government?
And yeah.
So you're saying you approve of Michael Gove? So you're saying you approve of all the bad things that are bad that poets are meant to hate?
No, I'm not saying I approve of arts cuts, but I'm not saying I don't either.
So you're saying you approve of this?
Well, I'll tell you what, Simon Turner doesn't approve. I don't think Jeremy Paxman would approve either. All that is free. All that is free.
This poem begins with the last line from the previous poem, Poverty.
Yeah, it does. And you can't put a price on our piety because art is all that is free. And then this poem, all that is free is careless. Is that deliberate? Sorry, I'm being crawled on by a spider. Can you not?
Why does it do that?
At the end of the previous poem it said, art is all that is free, and obviously there are many obvious kind of arguments against that, so then this poem is about those.
Why the reference to state-funded art at the end?
The reference to state-funded art at the end, well, it's something I keep coming back to, I suppose.
Could the collection have ended there?
22 poems. I think the collection could have ended here, but it didn't. So it carried on.
Do you think anyone even read that far in the book?
I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think people would have read this far. I don't know if anyone read it start to finish. I put a note at the beginning, tiny little note there saying.
Do you think anyone has ever read this
please
poem?
read the poems in the above order from start to finish. I don't know if anyone read this far. I hope they did, and I hope they read even further. I haven't read it. Okay, I think we're about to run out of battery anyway, so it might be a good place to, yeah.
Okay, see you. Okay, bye.
Okay.
What sort of groan do you think that would be? Sort of, or
It's not really poetry, is it?